Did you know that veterans are at a 57% higher risk of suicide compared to non-veterans? And around 17 veterans per day die from suicide in the United States? But what if there were groundbreaking treatments that could relieve mental health issues like PTSD, anxiety, and depression and actually save lives? In this week's episode, Brandon Davis and I are diving into the mental health breakthroughs that the Davis Focus Project offers that are specifically designed to support our veterans and improve their quality of life. Welcome back to all of my subscribers and particularly my HYSU members. We've built an amazing community over the past 5 years of the podcast. And if you're new to this channel and to the podcast, welcome to This is Getting Old, moving towards an age-friendly world. I'm Dr. Melissa Batchelor, and I am a nurse and a nurse practitioner with nearly 30 years of experience caring for older adults and their families. If you'd like to join me for some upcoming exclusive events, please stay tuned to the end to find out how you can join me for those. And the reason I wanted to focus on this topic today is because many veterans suffer in silence. They're facing challenges like PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and often without adequate resources or support. So, in this week's episode, Brandon Davis and I are diving into mental health breakthroughs that are specifically designed to support our veterans and improve their quality of life. So many veterans experience mental health issues, and there are a lot of groundbreaking treatments that are emerging that could change lives. Many veterans do suffer in silence. They face challenges like PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and they often don't have adequate resources or support. So in this video, I'm super excited to have Brandon Davis with me, and we are going to be talking about some of the mental health breakthroughs that are specifically designed to support our veterans and improve their quality of life. So welcome, Brandon.
Thank you, Melissa. This is my favorite topic, so I really appreciate you having me on.
Great. So before we get started, maybe you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about some of the work you've been doing.
Yes, absolutely. I was a Black Hawk instructor pilot in the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. It's the most elite aviation unit in the world. And I retired in August of 2023. And I went through a 3-year period where I suffered from pretty extreme depression and suicidal thoughts. And there were several barriers that I saw to getting treatment. And so I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And what I figured out was this world of neuroscience and brain health and physical health that are all really interconnected and it's very important to heal the system as a whole. And so the work that I've been doing is I started a nonprofit called the Davis Focus Project, and we help veterans heal from traumatic brain injury, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and insomnia. And we do that through custom human performance programming. We do advanced diagnostics in the beginning, and then we build the full plan to help them heal.
Okay. So I guess a good place to start then would be, how does stress affect the body and then ultimately impact our longevity?
Yeah, a lot of people hear how stress affects the body and they can see it, but I really think driving home the science, what's going on molecularly can help people understand it in a depth that will make them more mindful and more aware of what's actually going on, and they'll understand what the repercussions of it are. So I think this is an excellent place to start. So, and these, what I'm going to talk about it's just a couple of the pieces of the landscape and what's going on behind the scenes when you allow stress to take over your life and you're not able to appropriately manage it. And so that first place is really starting with cortisol, right? So as stress increases in the body, cortisol levels increase as well. And with the increase of cortisol, we can also see the reduction in something called fractalkine. And fractalkine is used to control microglia, which is an immune cell, right? And microglia releases different things like cytokines. Specifically, the ones that we're talking about are interleukin 6, interleukin 1, and there's a third one I can't think of off the top of my head. But when fractalkine is depleted, so when cortisol goes up, fractalkine is depleted, and that control over microglia disappears. When microglia has no control, it just dumps everything. And so all of these inflammatory cytokines are released. And to go a little deeper, inflammation is so bad for the system, especially for the brain, right? As inflammation increases, you start to see things like brain fog, low processing speed, um, slower recovery, especially in the brain. And if the symptoms increase too much, then it can prevent people from getting into deep sleep, which is where that real recovery and the removal of waste product uh, begins. And so if we can't get ourselves into a state of recovery to remove things like amyloid, proteins and tau proteins in the brain, then they just start to build up, and it causes even more damage to the brain. So it's this cascading effect if we're not able to manage stress. And it doesn't matter what kind of stress it is. It doesn't matter if it's psychological or physical. The Both of those act the same way. They both increase cortisol levels in the body. So really to summarize that, if you allow stress to go unmanaged, cortisol goes up, pro-inflammatory cytokines are released throughout the body. And if this becomes a chronic issue, it can damage the body, it can damage the brain, and it can prevent both of those from being able to heal themselves. Now, the next piece that I want to talk about is more along the lines of cellular health. And so we have something called mitochondria in every cell in our body. It has a ton of functions, but the one we're going to talk today is about energy production. So it is responsible for converting different molecules into ATP, which is energy at the molecular level. Now, when we enter something or when we enter a state like fight or flight, right, which we're going to talk about when we talk about neurofeedback here in a little bit, associated with beta waves, it's overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system. You're moving too fast. You're too spun up. Your nervous system is overactivated. And that in this state that we're talking about, it can be anything from, almost getting hit by a car to getting a really bad phone call. So it can be physical danger and it can be psychological danger. And, before the technological revolution or industrial revolution, most of our stressors were really physical, right? In nature. And now it's become very unbalanced, and most of them are predominantly psychological. But the way that our bodies were built to respond to a tiger or a lion, very close to you, very life-threatening situation, is to turn this fight or flight response on. It release adrenaline and noradrenaline, giving you the capability to do things to save your life, right? To be able to move fast, to be able to think fast. But the problem with that is when that system is activated, the body no longer wants to produce energy for other functions because this is more important. This is the most critical one. If you are not able to execute the action of fight or flight when needed, then you could die if it's a physical danger. And so the mitochondria will actually deny the cells of energy production for different systems or actions that aren't involved in this fight or flight response. And the most important one is immune system. So that's why you see people get really sick if or just have like, very very uncommon illnesses that pop up when their stress goes unmanaged. And like I said, it doesn't matter if it's physical or if it's psychological. The impact is the same, especially if you're sympathetic dominant, which is that fight or flight response.
Yeah, so it's funny, some of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking, when someone is in kind of like this fight or flight mode, or like our brains are normally on any given day, like if you walk past the same bush every day and nothing ever happens, your brain tends to not pay attention to that. But if you were to walk past that bush and hear a little twig snap, your brain would be a very, begin to tune in to that. And because that's something that was different and could lead to like the need to have a fight, flight, or fright type of response. Um, and so I was actually watching part of what you were saying too. So I was watching this Netflix series called American Primeval. There's it's very violent.
Great
Type
show, by the way.
of it is great. But the guy's like standing there, he's in the middle of the situation, and all of a sudden he can hear like somebody, the click of their gun when they're, and it's like outside, but his brain, because of that situation, again, this is back to physical survival, he tuned into that and then went, to attend to it. Whereas, so that just kind of makes me think about when your brain is under stress. If it's physical stress, it's going to respond in one way versus psychological stress. But if your brain's in overload, it can't respond to anything, which then, impacts mental health or could increase your anxiety, um, all those types of things. So, um, I don't know why I began to think about that, but maybe because I just watched it last night. But, um, you know, anytime you have physical or psychological danger, like that's just kind of how our brains react to that. Um, so, so let's talk a little bit about what traditional therapies, you, I mean, I think we all kind of know what some of them are, but how traditional therapies work compared to some of the different innovative therapies and programs, that you're doing.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much in your realm, but basically, clinical counseling is more about giving you some psychological tools to navigate the landscape, right? To understand, it's more or less problem solving.
Mhm.
And so it's great, it has a great place for that, but to be able to fully heal the body. I'll give you an example. I'm working with a company called I Express Genes right now, and they developed a biomarker that looks at RNA and can determine susceptibility to PTSD with a 97% accuracy. And this is typically this biomarker test is done after an accident or incident. And so really what we're learning is that there is a very real and present physiological response to stress and any of these psychological conditions that might occur. It's not just in the mind, it's not just a way of thinking, it is how your body is responding to these stimulus. And that's really why it's so important to incorporate things that can help to address these biomarkers that that we're seeing that are dysregulated. And so I guess you want me to kind of talk through the program, the
Well,
sequence.
I mean, I think that the basic premise that we're talking about is, there are, um, I don't know if you're familiar with Louise Hay's work, but there are things that happen in life, and it isn't just about how we're thinking about something. Sometimes, trauma and events actually are internalized, which is your point. That I don't think it really matters how much cognitive behavioral therapy somebody goes to or how much counseling they have. That will address part of the issue, but what you're really talking about is how do you take a deeper dive into using, current science, like the biomarkers you were just talking about, to actually, at a cellular level, see how that trauma has been internalized, which then impacts, someone's mental health, but it also impacts their physical health, and and results in what we call disease, which is dis-ease. Your mind and your body and your spirit are at ease. So we end up with disease. Um, so, um, And I think when we talked before, you had talked about you had tried some of these traditional therapies that were out there, and they weren't really getting the change that you wanted. And so let's talk a little bit about your journey into finding some of these other modalities, and then ultimately leading, into the Davis Focus project and the work you're doing there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, for me, the biggest barrier was that if I went to talk to somebody to a counselor in my unit, I would have gotten grounded, and I would have been pushed out of the military. I would have lost my career and everything I'd worked for. So simply talking to a counselor, it wasn't an option for me. And so I took a different route in the beginning. Started with behavior changes and some problem solving that's probably pretty close and similar to some forms of clinical counseling and maybe even spirituality or faith, and a lot of it for me was relying on God and praying, right? But I did start off with mindfulness and meditation, and the behavior changes that I developed were being able to identify negative trains of thought very early on, and and then what to do with them next, right? To keep myself from ruminating for 12, 15 hours a day about how I don't want to live, but I have these kids who I can't pass that pain off to. So I taught myself, through mindfulness education, how to identify rapidly, and then how to transition that to a positive thought by, problem solving, or maybe if I can't solve it today, picking a day on the calendar when I'll have a new resource, or something that may be available to me to help me solve it, or just saying that, okay, I can't affect it today. It's got to be in the future. Let's work on what we can do right now. Or maybe I just need to give myself a break and stop trying to do everything today. Right. So that was where I started. Then next, I was introduced to something called vibroacoustic therapy. It's this mat that you lay on. It has these speakers in it that play pretty low frequencies, and you play music that has frequencies associated with these different brainwaves that we're going to talk about here in a little while, that help you enter a deep state of relaxation. And so you have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest, relax, recover. um, and it is very powerful at activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So I was an aviator landing in terrorist backyards with tier one operators all the time in the dust, browning out at 70 feet. That was very common for me to be involved in those kinds of situations. And then I just went to nothing, and I was still stuck in this like survival mode when I come back from trips, and I had a really hard time regulating that and being able to come back and reintegrate into life with my family. And so being able to lay on this mat I would lay on it about an hour every night, and maybe 10 or 15 minutes into it, I was already down, and I was in this relaxed state where I was able to methodically and strategically think through the different things going on in my life and analyzing what actually matters to me. And okay, maybe that doesn't even matter to me right now. That's not important. And it was just in addition to that mindfulness strategy, but it was working at the central nervous system, which was very powerful. Next, I just discovered cold plunges, and I'll tell you, to this day, it is the most powerful, rapid pattern interrupter that I know. It's very quick. Anybody can do it, and I work with a lot of people who are suicidal, and that's typically the first or the second thing that we do. If it's not the first, the sound lounge is first, to get them relaxed enough to be prepared to go do something that hard, right? And so, just a little science behind the cold plunge. Um, it is really good at helping to balance the endocrine system, which a lot of times someone who has any kind of psychological situation going on, whether it's depression, bipolar, ADHD, what have you, the worst problem is that we can't regulate our own brains, right? And a lot of times that cause can be because of an endocrine imbalance, or it can be because of dysregulation of the brain or dysregulation of the nervous system. But speaking to the endocrine system, cold plunge increases dopamine baseline by 250%. There is nothing on the planet that you can do besides drugs that can do that for you. And the greatest part is and actually drugs can't do that for you for the most part. You talk street drugs, they can increase dopamine, but then there's a crash afterwards and a lower baseline, which is why they keep chasing it and why people become addicted. So this dopamine surge, it's not an instant release, but it does increase quite a bit because people feel amazing when they get out, and you can tell. Um, but then, if this was where they were at before, this is their new baseline. So it's higher and it lasts greater than 14 hours. So cold plunge is amazing at helping people to get that drive back. Dopamine is liquid motivation. It's why you do things. It's the driving power. It's will force, tenacity. It's the opposite of procrastination. It helps you to stop procrastinating, which is a big reason why a lot of people have anxiety. They let things build up. They don't handle them when they come at them. And it's like if you have something that takes 5 minutes or less, you should just get it done the second that it comes to you. And if you set that intention going into a cold plunge and then you do the cold plunge and you come out, it's amazing what you can get done. So the other side of the cold plunge is that it increases neuroplasticity. So I think a lot more people are starting to understand what neuroplasticity is, especially with psychedelic assisted therapy making the progress that it has. But essentially, neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to change. So when you're young, you have a lot of it. You can learn really fast. You're also very open-minded to a fault. You'll hop in a van for candy at the age of 3, right? So some of the neuroplasticity is, great. Some of it is not so great. But the older you get, the more set in your ways you get, the less neuroplasticity you have, the harder it is to learn. Now, behavior and pattern can change that, right? People who don't challenge themselves are going to get, they'll have less neuroplasticity, even more so than everyone else. But so now that we understand neuroplasticity, when you get in a cold plunge, the reason it's increased is because your body is releasing a lot of hormones, right? So adrenaline, noradrenaline, serotonin, and then increasing dopamine as well. And when you release a lot of hormones in the body, it's like pressing record on your memory. And I'll give you an example. You walk up to an intersection when you're young, maybe 4 years old, you almost get hit by a semi. Your dad grabs you by the back of the shirt, rips you back, turns you around, maybe slaps you, probably says, "Don't ever do that again." And and you probably remember a lot about it, the color of the vehicle, what your dad was wearing. But more importantly, what happens is every time you walk up to an intersection for probably the next 6 months, you look left and right a ridiculous amount of times. So it didn't just record the memory of what happened, it recorded and changed your operating system and how it handles that stimulus, which was a near death experience related to almost getting hit by a car. And so now your system knows how dangerous cars are and how to prevent getting in that situation again based on that memory. So, and that happens anytime a lot of hormones are released. Now, when you get in the cold plunge, the great thing is we're not at risk. We're limiting to time and temperature, right? So don't spend more than 10 minutes in there. And you know, I don't think most people are going to go much below the mid 30s. But most of the studies were conducted at 48, right? So we have these safety mechanisms in place, and now we can take advantage of this neuroplasticity. That's a chance for you to reprogram your brain. And I have 3 protocols. One of the main ones that we use is a visualization process. So once you get in there, get your breathing under control, try to get the cortisol levels down, and then I have people visualize the goals or the changes or whatever their intention is. Right? It's very intentional. You plan what your intentions are before you get into it. When you get in there, you visualize you in the future with that success or that change, but it's as if you already are. And so then you're looking at the things that you need to do to get there, but always keeping in the forefront of your mind that this is reality, and it's just you're not there yet. It's not a I want to do this or I wish I could do this. It's I am doing this. I see myself there at the finish line, and this is what I'm doing to get there. So that visualization, we're taking advantage of this neuroplasticity and we're imprinting it on your brain. The more reps of this you get, the more normal it becomes for your brain to operate on a daily basis, understanding that that's who you are. And the more easy it is to go do the things that you need to do to get to that finish line or that target. I have several others, but I would say that's the easiest one to explain, and I think that's a really good starting place for a lot of people. Now, so that was kind of my
Just gonna
path. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say what it makes me think of. I listened to another podcast. I think it was Diary of a CEO, but the guy was talking about helping people to imagine their future self, the future you. And, if you want to be healthy and strong, what are things that you're doing now that you need to stop doing in order to become that future you? So it's almost a combination of you know, changing some of your health behaviors. But then again, always having that visualization of that future you. And then, yeah, just like you said, planning out what are the steps you need to take to get from here to the future you. Um, so I think that's an interesting concept that you're doing. I'm not sure I would want to do it in the cold plunge.
I mean, you can do it in cryo too. A lot of people they like cryotherapy versus the cold plunge, and both of them have there's all kinds of other benefits too. There's a study, I think if you do 20 cryotherapy sessions within 2 weeks, there's like a 70% reduction in physical pain. I don't remember the rest of the statistics behind it, but there are some very impressive studies with cold therapy and pain mitigation, in addition to all these psychological benefits. Most people think about the physical stuff and they don't realize that actually the more powerful stuff is the psychological stuff, but it requires a little bit of planning, intention, and a protocol. If you just get in there, you're probably, you're still getting some of the physiological changes, but there's a lot you're missing out on if you don't go in there intentional. Now, from there, the next spot that I went to was neurofeedback. So my stepmom, she had a clinical counseling practice and discovered neurofeedback, started incorporating it into her practice, and then really started transitioning a lot of her clients to it. And I think she was kind of at that point where she was a little burnout, just I mean, out of all people, you know how it is hearing problems all the time, and it can weigh on you personally too. And I think she just kind of needed a break from that. So it was really good for everyone because there's something different, and it kind of works on the system in a different way. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the sequence of what we're doing and why I think it's very important. Because I've talked about what I did, but now I want to talk about the program and how it's conducted, before we get too deep into each one of these.
Yeah. And you're talking about the Davis Focus Project and the
The Davis
work that
Focus
you do.
Project.
Okay. All right. So just so
Exactly.
that people were clear.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us about
Yeah.
the Focus Project.
Yeah. So in the beginning, the first things that we try to do, no matter what the situation, unless somebody needs immediate medical attention, is to help the individual identify purpose, if they don't already have one, and you know having purpose in life. If have you read that book by Viktor Frankl? Um, oh, the name is eluding me right now. There's a book by Viktor Frankl, and so he was a clinical psychologist, in Auschwitz, and what he saw is that there were several different situations that happened around him that when people lost purpose, they died. And one example was a guy asked him, "Hey, when are we going to get rescued?" And he's like, "I don't know, just keep the faith," and gave him some other tips. And The guy said, I think March 31st. And so March 31st came around. They didn't get rescued, and he died of typhoid. And what he really connected this back to is just, his system was primed. He was putting everything into that time to make it. And then when his purpose left his, he gave out. And we know how connected the mind and the body are. And so I think his immune system just, it gave out, and that's why typhoid took him. But he gives so many examples of this happening over and over again when people lose purpose. So I think that purpose is one of the most important things that you can ensure someone going through a hard time has. That's kind of step one. Um, and then beyond that, I like to I like to help guide people towards leaning on their religion, and it doesn't matter what their religion is. And so if you can arm them with these easy tools that they can practice and they can do as much or as little on their own time, it gives them a really solid foundation for navigating the rest of their pain and navigating the rest of the therapy, and staying motivated throughout it. Now, the next part, and this can be happening simultaneously,
Yeah,
is
I was just going to say, sense of purpose is not only, it's a Blue Zone principle, it's part of age-friendly community. So sense of purpose is very strongly tied to longevity, and you provided a great example of that. So what's the second part of your sequence?
so the second part of the sequence is most often happening simultaneously. So that's the biomarker tests, right? And prior to this, we have them fill out a questionnaire, and then we kind of determine where to go from there. But our focuses are, the a lot of these situations that physiologically um, make it easier or make it harder to navigate these situations, like inflammation in the body, in the brain, cellular health. If you don't have energy, if your body does not know how to produce energy efficiently, or your mitochondria are damaged, then you're going to have a hard time healing, both physically and psychologically. And then, lack of nutrition, everything from, vitamins and minerals that they might be deficient in, all the way to the macronutrients, just not eating enough, or eating a balanced enough meal. Um, and so once we do these, we understand whether, someone does have inflammation, where their cellular health is at. If they're having problems with, a lot of people with TBI, they end up having very low testosterone. Their hypothalamus, pituitary, and testes axis is dysregulated, and it's not producing. And so once we get these biomarkers, then we develop a plan of action. And we try to do this as least invasively as possible. So, putting someone on testosterone is kind of the absolute last resort. What we really want to do is help to give them a nutrition plan, and a fitness plan, and then a plan to use some of the modalities throughout our facility first, to help try to alleviate, endocrine imbalances. And then, along with the nutrition, we can give them supplements for deficiencies that they might have. But it's also education at the same time. If somebody does have a lot of inflammation, especially neuroinflammation, then it's very important to adjust the diet. And a lot of times that diet looks something like a modified ketogenic diet, where we're not eliminating carbohydrates, but we're reducing them, and we're changing the types of carbohydrates that we're putting in our body. Less breads, less gluten, less things that produce these pro-inflammatory cytokines. And so once we've developed the nutrition and fitness plan, and then we also provide that plan that utilizes the equipment within our facility, right? And the reason that we do nutrition and inflammation first is because if we're going to heal the brain, especially if it has physical damage, like a traumatic brain injury, first we have to relieve or reduce one of the stimulus that is creating the damage, and get them in a place where when we do start to heal the brain, it doesn't re-damage itself or regress. So, and kind of backing up one step, we also need to identify whether they have sleep problems or not, right? And so if someone has sleep problems, if they're not sleeping a lot, if they have insomnia, interrupted sleep, if they're not getting into deep sleep or this non-REM sleep, what happens is there is a system that removes waste product. It's called a glymphatic system. It's your brain's immune system. And so when you when you get into deep sleep, you are operating on a frequency range called delta, which is it's the decimal point to 4 hertz, I believe, is that frequency range. It's very slow. And it's so slow that it when it's pulsating, it activates this glymphatic system, which is it pumps cerebral spinal fluid through the brain and removes waste products like tau and amyloid proteins. And so as it flushes this out of the brain, it allows the brain to heal and not have this waste product stacked up, which starts to help with relieving brain fog and increasing processing speed. And really, I mean, I would say a majority of any of the symptoms you might have with a psychological condition. So now that we are starting to nourish the body the way it's supposed to, we're detoxifying it. We're aiming to increase cellular function, and we're ensuring that the body is getting the sleep that it needs. Now we're on the road to recovery in a way where we can go do things that actually physically heal the brain, right? So next we can do something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And so hyperbaric oxygen therapy is really great for relieving pressure in the brain, increasing blood flow, and increasing oxygen delivery to the brain. It's great at reducing inflammation, and it works very synergistically in that way with the rest of the program, and removing these waste products as well. But it's so much more effective if you do these other steps first. If you're getting good sleep, you're getting good nutrition, and you're not continuously stimulating inflammation in your body. And so additionally, some of the other equipment and things that we have in the facility, we have cold plunge, cryotherapy, we have red light, IR sauna, traditional sauna. We have pulse electromagnetic field therapy. PEMF is very good at a lot of the same things that HBOT are, reducing inflammation, mitochondrial health, which is really that cellular function and producing ATP. And then we have compression therapy, which helps to stimulate the movement of the lymphatic system. It helps with pain too, but it can also help with inflammation. And so the biomarker assessment that we have, one of them that we use is a metabolic analyzer. It measures breath, oxygen, CO2, pressure, respiration, heart rate, and SpO2. And between those, it literally tells us which modalities this individual should be doing. So it helps us prioritize. Um, it's almost a way to triage those biomarkers and then attack the worst ones first, because not everybody has 3-4 hours to walk into this facility and dedicate to healing. So if you only have 30 minutes, I have to the goal is to get you the thing that's going to work the most for you. And so after we've developed this full plan and ran them up to where we're at with the physical healing, some of the other things that we're doing along the way is this mindfulness, education, and maybe identifying other areas that they might have problems. Maybe they have financial problems, maybe they have legal problems. And so these aren't necessarily things that we handle in-house, but we're also a resource center. So we can we can redirect them to those resources. And the big thing that I totally forgot. Okay, so now that we've healed the brain physically, right? Now it's going to be the most receptive to rewiring the brain, because physical healing and the wiring of the brain are two completely different things. The HBOT and reducing neuroinflammation helps regenerate the brain, but there may still be damage in the sequence of firing in which brain waves we're operating on. And so I'll walk you through the four brain waves that we look at when we do a brain map, and then we follow it up with neurofeedback treatment. And there's more brain waves in this, but we'll just talk about these four. So at the highest, you've got beta, which is if there's a large amount of beta waves present, you're typically in fight or flight. So it's a sympathetic nervous system activation. And like I said, this can be to save your life, but it can also, in our new world of the technological, where we're at with technology, we have so many other stressors. It can be a bad phone call. It can be as simple as a bad phone call that puts you into it. Next below that, you have alpha waves, which are, just kind of general wakefulness. It's probably where both of us are at right now as we're speaking. And then below that, you have theta, which can be a dreamlike wakefulness or light sleep. It's a very creative state. And then below that, you have delta waves. And again, those are the lowest. So it's the highest frequency is beta, and then going down that line in order, delta is the lowest frequency. And so I'm just going to give one example of or I'll tell you the dysregulations, and I'll give you one example of a dysregulation and how we're able to treat it with neurofeedback. So the most common that I see is beta dysregulation, and this can be disproportion of beta waves between the left and the right side of the brain, which there naturally already kind of occurs, but typically it's more beta waves present in the brain globally than should be. And so when we see that, a lot of the common symptoms are anxiety, insomnia, OCD, panic attacks. It's the brain is just firing super fast, and a lot of times it's too much for people to feel comfortable handling, and especially if it lasts for long periods. And it makes it really hard to get into those lower frequencies and to go to sleep. So if you can't ever get into delta, then we've already talked about the problems that happen. You're not able to remove this waste product from the brain, and it continues to build, and then it just exacerbates all of these psychological conditions. And so the way that neurofeedback works is we put this headset on, and most have between 12 and 21 EEGs, and they measure the frequencies that section of the brain is operating on, and then they measure the interconnectivity between the parts of the brain. And so with beta dysregulation, obviously we're seeing a very high presence of beta waves in the brain. And so the plan is to stimulate the brain to reduce the amount of beta waves that are active. And so that's where neurofeedback comes in. So once we've done the brain map, and then we put someone on a program, in this exact instance, we would put them on a beta downregulation protocol. And neurofeedback is this very simple feedback system. So the way that the version that I use works is they can play a video game, they can watch Netflix, Amazon on their computer, whatever. And but it needs to be something stimulating that they really want to see and hear. So you pick your favorite movie or TV show and you're watching it, and you turn neurofeedback on. You've got a headset on, you have these EEGs and grounding sensors on. And when your brain is producing beta waves, which we don't want it to do, the screen will dim and the volume will go down. And then when your brain is acting appropriately, or the way that the training protocol wants the brain to operate, which is a reduction of beta waves, then the screen gets brighter and the volume goes up. So it's a very simple system, but the complexity of it is that your brain is doing thousands of calculations, continuously. And so it takes a while, it takes the brain a little while to figure out what it did Right. It doesn't know exactly what it is. You know that you're supposed to be reducing beta waves, but the brain is trying to understand exactly what that means to reduce beta waves. And so, it takes a little while, but typically people are starting to see changes at about 5 sessions, and some people see full relief at 20 sessions, and then some take up to 30 to 40 sessions, and every 15 sessions we'll do a new brain map, and because it's targeting the worst problem, right? So you do a questionnaire, and then it compares it to the brain map, and it says, okay, both the brain map and you say that you have high anxiety, and it compares all these things, and it throws out the false positives or false negatives, and it targets the symptoms that correspond to a region and frequency that are the worst. So it's like triaging your worst problems, and so it combats that first problem. And then we do another brain map at 15, and then it establishes what your new worst problem is, and then you just systematically go through it until your brain is regulating itself. And the most common thing that people see early on is their ability to move between states of mind. And what this means is, say, maybe you have somebody who just ruminates all day about something horrible that happened to them. Well, instead of spending 12 to 16 hours a day, pretty rapidly, it starts to reduce how much time they spend on this train of thought, which is the brain learning how to self-regulate. And that's what all of this is about. Neurofeedback is all about the brain's ability to self-regulate.
Yeah, it just gives me a lot of hope for future because it certainly isn't, I don't think something that you can find that, it's not the most common treatment modality that you find out there, but it will be nice when science gets to that point. Um, because before people, you think just how we treat mental health in general. It's like, buck up or it's your problem. But if it's a physiological problem, that's quite different, but we just can't see physiology. But by having these biomarkers and the brain map, to give someone like an actual reason or rationale and then give them something they can do about it. I can just see so many more people. Yeah. Like if you had a little cap, you could watch TV. It's like, and then I can feel better. And it's just going to help a lot more people.
For a lot of people, it's no change. They've got to go do the brain map. That takes about an hour. But then when they're doing the neurofeedback, they don't even have to wear the cap. It's just two little EEGs. They go in the back. And if you were going to watch TV, I mean, you know, you're no change to your plan. You just continue watching TV, but you're healing. And it's, I've heard it, I've heard this said by a lot of leaders. In this field with neurofeedback, but they say that 30 to 40 sessions is the equivalent to 10 years of meditation. Because in the end, that's a lot of what meditation is about, especially if you're doing that education piece and not just practicing the same type over and over again. Is you're teaching your brain precision of mind, how to regulate itself, how to control your reactions to certain stimulus, and how to not stay stuck on thoughts and how to move through them. So it's all
Mhm.
about regulation.
Right. Yeah. And I had written down somewhere in my notes earlier, you very much are talking about, precision and kind of personalized care for someone, and particularly not having to take medications that have, different side effects. And I'm sure there's probably instances where that, blending those two modalities, initially might be helpful, um, for some folks. But, I think eventually it would be nice to not have to take medications if you can learn to retrain your brain. Um,
Not a single person who's went through our program and completed it is on medications today.
okay, well, that's
Not a
a
single person.
as well. So if somebody wanted to learn more about the Davis Project, how to get in touch with you, learn more about your work, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can go to the davisfocusproject.com to learn more. We're about to launch our new website here in the next couple weeks. We'll have some testimonials up as well. But we're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of that as the Davis Focus Project. And if you want to support us, the I want to show you the impact that you can have. So if you were, and I know this is a lot, but if you were to give $60 a month, that's $720 a year, which is the cost of us to run somebody through a full program. So $60 a month gets could actually save somebody's life. Now, I know most people aren't want to do that, but most people have, a Netflix or Amazon subscription that's $10, $20 a month that they probably don't even realize they have a duplicate of. And so if you can give, even if you can give 10 or $20 a month, it only takes, two, three people to add up to fully funding a veteran or a service member that's going through a hard time and to save their life. And, you know, this stuff really works. It really does. So yeah, just so appreciative for you having me on the show, Melissa. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing. I love your enthusiasm for, looking outside the box. And yeah, thank you.
So another question, if a veteran's listening and they're actually having some challenges themselves, like where do people like how could they get help from you too? They have to be local, close to you, they have to be in Tennessee. Like how far range do you have?
Yeah, so we have limited functionality right now until our phase two location is open later on this year. Um, so you can reach us at our website. There's an email address on there in a form. And here's my promise to you: if you come to us for help, even if you're not in the area and I can't help you locally, I promise to help to find the help that you need. Absolutely. So there's so many nonprofits that we're connected with that do some of the modalities that we have. So there's national reach for several of the things that we talked about today, and I'd be more than happy to connect people with those resources if they're not local.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if somebody was listening and going through this themselves, they knew how to reach out to get help. But then certainly donations and helping support your work is incredibly important too. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Again, thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate our time together, and hope to see you soon.
Yep, me too. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to be a part of my community and continue to learn more about aging, age-friendly initiatives, or Alzheimer's disease, don't forget to drop by my website at MelissaBPhD.com to grab your free podcast insider guide. You can also join the podcast private community on Facebook, and all podcast insiders are invited by email for exclusive live events. So I hope you'll stop by to grab your free guide and then keep an eye on your inbox weekly for these special insider only invitations. If you found value in this episode, please hit the like button and share it with someone else that could find it helpful. Hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you're alerted to the next episode when it comes out. And until next time, be well.